Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the FIA Group.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Empowering Plans Podcast. I am your host today, Brady. I am an attorney with the FIA Group and the director of our Legal Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Department. And joining me today for a special edition of updates for employers and what you need to know about vaccines is Philip Qualo. He is our consultant, all things compliance related, our benefits guru. Phil, say hello.
Hey, Brady. Hey, everyone. I'm glad to be back. It's been a minute, and I'm really excited to kind of get into this topic here. I know it's been, kind of big news all over the press, so I'm looking forward to digging into it.
Awesome. Yeah, we've gotten tons of questions. I mean, really, it's been amazing how quickly these vaccines, frankly, became available to the general public. I think it was a great success, frankly, the operation getting them to us. But as fast as they've come to us, so have the questions about, can people mandate vaccines? How much are they going to cost? Do I have to cover them? And so we wanted to do today in this podcast was talk about some of the new questions or some of the answers to old questions that we've seen, because a lot has changed in the springtime, right? We have more vaccines on the market, a lot more people. I think we've exceeded that, 200 million doses mark in the first 100 days, right? So now we're starting to see employers asking new questions about what to do with their workforces and et cetera. But I think what we're seeing now also is a reduce in demand for the vaccine. And so questions are being asked by those employers who want to get their workforce vaccinated. Can they require it? What are the ramifications? What are the exceptions? And so I think a good place to start, Phil, will be, what are the concerns? What are the guidelines currently with respect to mandating the COVID-19 vaccine?
Right. So I would say, one thing I've definitely been hearing, and I think from our clients, and let's face it, outside of the employment setting, everybody's talking about this. Because you've got these conspiracy theorists who think there's some kind of chip in these vaccines, and there's some people that are just really vehemently opposed to it. So I think just to start off, I know there's been questions about, well, do we think the government will mandate it? Do we think states will eventually mandate it at some point? Kind of taking that decision outside of the realm of the employer. So just to kind of knock that out, from what I see so far, at least from the federal government end, there's never been a mandate, at least, for any kind of vaccine or any preventative measure that was only approved for emergency use authorization only. So because of that, I think it's safe to say, at least at this point, before there's FDA approval, we're likely not going to see a overall mandate for the entire country. I think when it does become FDA approved, if it does, I think that'll be a whole different, type of questions. However, we love our constitutional rights, and I can already see, a lot of opposition to that based on you can't force me to inject something that I don't want to inject. So, that's going to be a whole other debate. I am seeing one thing. I know when it comes to states, there's been clear guidance saying in the state's capacity as an employer and with certain industries that they regulate, there is probably going to be more latitude for a state to regulate and require vaccines. I think the best examples are healthcare workers. Those jobs are fairly regulated. You need certain vaccines. You need certain preventative measures for your own safety and for the safety of patients. So I think in that area, we are going to see, states maybe narrowly mandating the vaccines to those areas. Now, when it comes to the employers, it's a whole different ballgame where at this point, there's really no unified guidance here. One thing I'm noticing, we're seeing some employers hold back. A lot of their staff is at home. They're kind of waiting out for the summer and, just kind of proactively asking around, how many people are getting the vaccine, even if it's anonymous surveys, just to get an idea, the numbers of individuals who are getting vaccinated and hopefully in the goal of opening their offices back up. Now, one thing that was interesting, so because we are definitely seeing employers kind of go out there and say, we are mandating the vaccine. Now, I know there was some recent guidance from the ADA that seems to put some limitations on that. And this guidance has always been around, but they're applying it specifically to the COVID vaccine. It seems like there's no objection at this point, because there's likely been no litigation, saying that an employer cannot require employees to be vaccinated. However, I think, what has to be clear is that based on certain things that will have to be accommodated, I know there was guidance saying that, if someone refuses to take the vaccine, whether it's due to a disability or another unrelated disability where they feel like they're at risk, or even if it's for sincerely held religious beliefs, an employer is going to have to accommodate that. So, we're definitely seeing employers kind of put their neck out there and mandating it, obviously try to encourage their employees to get back to work. But I think what we're going to see is some difficult situations where you're going to have employees who are going to definitely use, their religious beliefs. Even there's some valid concerns, like, for example, pregnant women. I know there's been some guidance out there kind of saying like, well, it's okay, but, I know a lot of moms that because of the, lack of FDA approval are really not too into it. So I think it's going to be interesting when you have that situation where there's a pregnant employee and that employer has a vaccine mandate. One final thing I wanted to note, and I'm kind of seeing this more and more, I'm seeing even states and employers trying to incentivize COVID vaccines. So again, no real clear guidance on this because this is, a unprecedented situation here. Obviously we didn't have this kind of technology during the last, big pandemic. Obviously, it's a little different there, but I am seeing some. I know, for example, the state of West Virginia is offering a $200, $100 incentive to young people to go and take this vaccine. So I think this is going to be a very interesting time, especially for employers, because most employers will try to model and see what other employers are doing in their industry, but there's really no consensus in what employers are going to be doing across the board because, there's really no kind of regulation kind of demanding that right now. So I think you're going to see some employers incentivizing, some employers mandating it and just seeing if it sticks. I also just think work is going to change generally because, it's been over a year now. There are some offices that have just not reopened. We've been fortunate. We were able to open with limited capacity, but some buildings, some employers have not opened. So I think when it comes to, those type of employers, I think we're going to see a lot of these matters are going to be really dealt with when their employee population comes back. Obviously, it'll be dependent, on how big the spread is at that point. I know as of today in Massachusetts, I think in the past 24 hours, we reached our lowest infection number of 812 individuals. So, and I hear there might be some updates from the CDC on, face mask protocols. So it seems like we're trending in the right direction. But I think when it comes to the vaccine in the workplace, there's definitely some guidance out there to use. But, without anything specific like demanding a vaccine mandate, I think we're going to see some litigation probably for employees who are dead set against it. And then also some considerations whether, if an employer wants to mandate vaccinations, whether if someone refuses, whether they can just simply say, okay, well, you just can't come to the building. So we'll give you everything you need to work from home, but maybe you can't make it to the building. So a lot of things to think about there. And this is something we're going to be monitoring closely, obviously, as businesses are starting to open. Brady, and I know you had mentioned earlier, and we were talking about as businesses start to reopen, employees are coming back or want to come back. And obviously, there are some considerations there for employers to think about it. Obviously, workplace safety, but, some employers haven't had to deal with that yet, with a returning population. So any thoughts on where that might go?
Yeah, I think the discussion, is going to quickly change, as more and more people are getting vaccinated. I think I read a stat a couple of years ago that still 57% of workers are not vaccinated. So we still have a long way to go. And to your point, Phil, about mandates, I think what we're seeing is most employers are not choosing to go the mandate route and they're going instead with the incentive route. And one thing I would just let everyone know who hasn't tuned into our webinar, which we just did today, is that there's a new program announced by the Biden administration that will offer tax credit to employers who offer employees a PTO day, paid time off, to get their vaccine or to recover from side effects. I think that'll go a long way to incentivizing people to get their shot if they know they can get a day out of work. If the employers know they can grant that day out of work and get a tax credit up to $511 per day, up to 10 days per person for employers that are less than 500 employees. That's a big deal. I think that'll go a long way in incentivizing people to actually consider the vaccine. But, okay, great. Everyone has the vaccine or most people get the vaccine. They want to go back to work. There are more questions to ask and to be concerned about. So one question we actually got through our consulting inbox was, what about the vaccination status of your workforce? Can you disclose it to other employees, to your customers? And the short answer is no, you can't, because an employee's individual vaccination status is confidential medical information. It must be protected like any other PHI. And so what you can say is you can offer a general statement about the estimated percentage of vaccinated employees. So you can say, we have about 80% or 60% of our workforce, but you have to be careful. The points that Phil noted before about those employees who may have certain objections that are legally protected, both religious exemptions or medical exemptions to getting the vaccine, you don't want to essentially out those people. So if your statement to your employee population would somehow, point out the fact that, certain individuals who are of a religious sect are not getting the vaccine, you want to be careful about that because that'll be revealing, who the identities of those people are, and you don't want to do that. We've also seen some questions come in about, what do I do if I want to incentivize people to come back who are vaccinated first? Can I only allow people who are vaccinated to come back to the office first? And practically, that may make the most sense, right? Because you're trying to get your operational status, moving and also protect the workplace. So you don't want people who are not vaccinated to come back without having proper safeguards there. But again, you want to do this in a way that you're not essentially outing people who may have legitimate reasons not to get vaccinated. And so you have to think about those issues and make sure that you're protecting privacy pretty much all the time. I think aside from that, I just want to go over an update on the status of vaccine coverage and the cost of coverage. We get this question a lot about the cost of an administration fee for the vaccine. So you have, of course, the vaccine itself costs money, but also the administration fee associated with the vaccine is a separate charge. And people have noticed that, this can be an expensive charge and it has to be covered at 100% with no cost sharing under the CARES Act requirements. And so if you do see a bill come in for the vaccine plus the administration fee, our position is that there is a distinction between the administration fee and the facility fee, right? So if you have an employee who goes to a facility, an outpatient clinic, for example, as opposed to say a CVS, right? And they get their vaccine there, if there is a separate fee called a facility fee, in our view, that is not classified as part of the vaccine fee. So in those instances, if you're absolutely clear that it's not an administration fee, that it's a facility fee, you are able to assess that fee as you would any other claim under the health plan. So you're not going to be required to pay the facility fee at 100% with no cost sharing, right? It could be subject to other conditions in terms of the benefit plan overall. So that's the short answer on, what you can expect in terms of the charges. And when your workforce is returning to the office, keeping in mind privacy. And I think we're getting there one day at a time with more employees coming back to the office, more people getting vaccinated. And Phil, as you alluded to, Massachusetts just announced that August 1st, they're releasing the restrictions on businesses in terms of capacity. And so, knowing FIA, I think we'll be probably fully open at that point on August 1st if we're allowed to actually follow through with that. But yeah, I think we've covered a good amount of ground there. Phil, do you have anything you want to add to what I've said about getting back to the office and the concerns associated with that?
I guess I'd like to just, kind of briefly share my own experience. I received my second, vaccine dosage last week. I don't mind sharing this. And, I know I've been hearing a lot about these side effects. I lucked out. I didn't have them. I know it's an individual decision to make. So, I don't want to be one to say, oh, everyone go get it because, I know it's not FDA approved. So I know that puts a question mark in a lot of heads because, with FDA approval, there's always going to be questions of any kind of like vaccine treatment, with the government, always going to have the conspiracy theorists. But I know I personally did it for myself because I didn't want to be held back. I want to be able to travel. And it just makes me wonder, like, I know there's ways, and we've seen this in the past, and just like a closing comment, it makes me wonder if there are other ways that even though the government might not specifically mandate it, but I think at some point we might be looking at where things might be difficult for individuals who are not vaccinated. You know what I mean? Extra steps
Absolutely.
to travel, for example. I know I haven't seen that yet because I'm about to travel and I have to take a COVID test, even though I'm vaccinated and beyond the 2 weeks. So, but I could see that coming. It's not a prediction. I can't see the future, but I just could see that where at some point they just make it so difficult to, not have one that I could see, somehow if you want to be able to like live fully, you need your vaccination card. But we'll see.
Right. We will see. To be continued. I'm sure we'll have another update in a couple of months or maybe even before that, depending on how quickly the situation changes with respect to, getting vaccines out or the guidance, which, as we know, the CDC is meeting, I think today even, to release some updated guidance on what vaccinated people can and cannot do. And so we'll be looking for that. And I'm sure, we will be publishing on all of our other different media platforms the updates that you need to know from a health plan perspective and from an employer perspective as well. But I think that's enough for today. So on behalf of myself, Phil, and our awesome producer, Pat the Man Santos, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Another edition of the Empowering Plans podcast, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.